Hello, everybody. And finally, we're getting to the end of our first day of She Loves Tech 2021. We've seen an amazing lineup the whole day, but this last panel has been everything that I've been waiting for. This last panel, Afghanistan, through the Agender Lens, is actually reminds me of the very reason why we built She Loves Tech in the first place, to really understand how technology can change and improve and empower the lives of women and girls around the world, especially in countries whereby women face many more challenges and obstacles in the physical world. I've always wondered since the beginning of our journey what the digital world can actually do for women in terms of creating opportunities, income, and all kinds of possibilities that were not necessarily available in a physical world. So without further ado, I'd love to begin our final panel of the day. I'm here with these amazing ladies, all with a deep connection either from or doing work in Afghanistan. Obviously, 2021 has been a tumultuous time for the country, but when I speak to these women, when I work with them, when I learn from them, I think it gives us all unbridled hope in terms of who they've been able to mobilize and the support they've been able to mobilize on the ground, and that persistence, to their work, that dedication and commitment, despite some of the roughest of circumstances. So, without further ado, I'd like to kick off this panel to Shaharzad. As chairperson of the Afghanistan Independent Human Rights Commission, we've had the pleasure of meeting before through the Rockefeller Foundation. Perhaps you could share with us what is the current situation in Afghanistan on the ground right now.
Thank you, Virginia. I'm so honored to be part of this panel and to be part of this conversation. And thank you and She Loves Tech for the spotlight on Afghanistan and on Afghan women. It's really needed, sorely needed. The situation on the ground right now is dire. We have both a humanitarian crisis and a human rights crisis. The humanitarian crisis means that majority of Afghans are struggling to survive. So there is dire need for humanitarian assistance to the country. Additionally, because of sanctions and lack of cash liquidity, it means that even those who have money in the bank have difficulty accessing them. The economy is really grappling. And if you ask ordinary Afghans how they see the future, 3 months from now, no one really has clarity, and it's very difficult to have hope. In fact, it's really difficult for me to have hope about the next few months for my country. The biggest fear is that it will get worse unless we collectively work to bring attention to the situation, to bring humanitarian aid to those who need it, making sure that women are at the center of aid delivery and that they are not neglected. And then additionally, address the human rights situation. As you all know, there is currently a gender apartheid in Afghanistan because their women are not allowed to attend secondary school in many parts of the country still, while in some provinces secondary schools have opened and others they haven't. So we are the only country in the world where girls are not being allowed to go to school and pursue an education because of their gender. Additionally, universities, public universities remain closed for female students. Women have gone back to work in education and health, but those are the only 2 sectors where women can go back to work. And many other sectors, and Afghan women had slowly, opened a path in many different sectors, in business, in music, and entertainment, in police and army, and engineering, and all these different sectors. Women who worked in these sectors are now at home and don't know if they will ever have their jobs back, if they will ever be able to continue pursuing their ambitions, be promoted, and make a difference in their fields. And that's what, think of all the little girls in Afghanistan. They don't know. They don't know if they can pursue their dreams to become engineers and astronauts and technicians and, software engineers. because they don't have access to the basics right now. Additionally, of course, the general human rights situation in terms of freedom of expression, access to information is quite dire. It's a regime that's very scared of criticism and actually stifles criticism at any cost. And we have had, unfortunately, a very grim and horrific trend of targeted killings across the country, particularly targeted killings of former national security forces, as well as activists and journalists, including some women, with impunity. So these cases are not being investigated and people are not being accountable. And Taliban de facto authorities are actually taking rule of law in their. So a de facto authority in sitting in a province who decides to arrest someone, the liberty to then prosecute this person and be the judge without having any of those qualifications. So there is no proper prosecution, no proper judgment, no proper access to justice. That's the current situation. That doesn't mean we have to lose hope, of course. What gives me hope personally, despite the difficult situation the extended family and my people of my country, women of my country are in, is the fact that there is continued resistance, particularly by women. They go out to streets to protest. Women education activists are trying to find ways to offer classes online. There are secret schools going on, and women are writing their stories and putting it out there for the world to hear and see. And that's where I think we should focus on broadening that space that exists inside Afghanistan, and of course on getting aid and money to the country. Thank you.
Thank you, Shaharzad, for that. Very, I think, both moving, but also, I think giving us that hope despite being in a time of crisis. I think that's much needed right now. I turn the spotlight to my friend Natasha, whose work I've always admired, even before the current crisis, in terms of doing women's rights work on the ground in Afghanistan. Natasha, maybe you can tell us a little bit more. You have a team of rights defenders on the ground. How have you mobilized yourself differently, since the crisis of this year, and what is now still possible under the current regime?
Thank you, Virginia, for including this as part of the She Loves Tech conference. First and foremost, it also, I think, brings me great pride that this is being organized by a Singaporean team, and that we care for Afghanistan beyond Singapore's primary focus on the export of terrorism from Afghanistan. So to those who may not know much about my work, I'm the co-founder and legal director of an NGO in Afghanistan. We are a team of human rights defenders and lawyers, and what we do is we provide robust legal representation to survivors of gender-based and sexual violence, oftentimes survivors in cases which no other lawyer wants to take because of very influential and powerful defendants. Out of that was also the need to grow a next generation of human rights defenders and lawyers. So we, in the last few years, taken up cohorts of law students, female law students primarily, to enable them to pass the bar admissions course and to train them to represent cases in court, as well as participate in drafting of laws and policies which affect women's rights and access to justice. Like many organizations, we're based in Kabul, and within the first day of the Taliban taking over Kabul, our office was raided. We were fortunately able, through one of our lawyers, to secure and clear out the documents and our equipment from the office. And I guess, like the rest of you, the rest of NGOs in Afghanistan faced the evacuation crises. Most of our team members left because we represented women in very tough cases, and those who were imprisoned were released by the Taliban and came out to threaten and harass them. So most of my team have left. As part of our next generation program, we're building this team of law students and graduating students to become lawyers. Amongst them, they started organizing. They called on us to restart our capacity building program, to train them to organize themselves And amongst that, we just loosely assembled ourselves, even whilst some of our team members were fleeing and going through very personally distressing situations, to plan, okay, what can we do? Identify the most important needs. In September, the Ministry of Economy had released a statement saying that NGOs and companies can return back to work. This was mostly for male NGOs. Through advocacy, a group of civil society organizations reached out to Ministry of Economy on women's NGOs continuing to work. They said to wait until further regulations have been passed. And so within our team, we just came together and we mocked up talking points, how to persuade the Ministry of Economy to allow us to continue to operate. We went down to the Ministry of Economy. There were 4 of us there, and said, we have this team of 50 law students. They want to continue to learn things like how to interview vulnerable survivors, how to draft petitions, how to draft legal documents and correspondences. And we were able to meet with members of the ministry who were from the former government and who knew our work. And they introduced us to the Taliban leadership in the Ministry of Economy. And from there, they allowed us to continue to work. So now we've set up an office, we have a new space. And our focus is now on organizational resilience. So how do we train our new team to manage and run an NGO, and to reframe some of our work and concepts to make sure that we don't cause a danger to ourselves and to the survivors and communities that we represent. So these are the few ways in which we are able to work, but things are constantly changing, and it's an ever fluctuating situation, and we'll have to take things one step at a time.
Thank you, Natasha, for your courage and for inspiring us all. I was a lawyer myself for a very long time, and I know just how difficult that work can be, especially in conflict areas. I turn the spotlight now to Sara, who is the founder of Edtech. And I was very, very fortunate, my team and I, actually, to find Sara and her work online. I love what she's building, a data-driven platform, which I'll allow her to talk a bit more about Edtech. And Sara, perhaps you can tell us more about, the vision behind Edtech. Why, as a young Afghan woman, why do you decide to build Edtech? Even before the current crisis, and how can technology really help in times of crisis for peace building, for the protection of rights?
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be speaking, and also along my fellow panel mates. It's just an absolute honor. Thank you so much. For Ihtisab, essentially, it came from lived experience. I had been walking home one day, and in mid-2018, there was incessant violence, explosions, and I was just a few yards away from one, and we were barricaded at home for about 12 hours, just watching that situation unfold. And when I woke up the next morning and went out, I wondered how a country like Afghanistan, which is consistently reeling with instability, doesn't have the money, or funders, didn't see the necessity to build a platform through a 911 number or a short code, or an easily accessible platform where people could get information, pertinent information about their city, about their government, about daily occurrences in the city. And for us, building Ihtisab cost about $40,000. And, we've seen huge budgets for programs like these in civic technology in Afghanistan, especially led by USAID and a lot of other large institutions, which are able to, cough up $12 to $20 million for projects which have essentially failed within the first week. And it goes to show that Afghans know how to respond to situations and how to build solutions. They just need that trust. So Ihtisab essentially is a platform for information, and what we do now through our application is we send near real-time and verified reports on what's going on in Kabul city. So that ranges from inconsistent electricity. Obviously, inconsistent electricity is a daily problem for Afghans, but if we find out that a certain electricity pole has been damaged, or if we're seeing that there's a specific traffic roadblock that's affecting a large part of the city. Obviously, explosions, gunfire, we've been posting that every day. We have an average of about 3 alerts that are sent to our users per day on average post August 15th. And we are now have expanded to Herat and Nangarhar, two of the provinces where we saw the most interest from our users to expand. And Herat actually is the one that was driven by women who requested a platform like Ihtisab and to get those alerts. So yeah, it's been the one thing that keeps me awake. The one thing that keeps me living day by day is through Ihtisab, the ability to just do something for my country. And I think that Natasha and Shaharzad, they can attest to that. It's just being able to do anything at this point keeps us going. So I'm very, very blessed to have this opportunity to give back.
Thank you, Sara. I mean, that's absolutely inspirational. I've seen similar technology like what you're building being used in places like Palestine, again, for sort of real-time sort of security incidents and for safety. But and I remember a couple years ago going to Kathmandu, even, right after the Nepal earthquake, and young people like yourself literally crowd built, a data-driven platform so as to help the army actually coordinate supplies, because nobody actually knew what the real-time situation was. And it was done by a group of young people over like literally a couple of days. And I was so impressed by how the use of technology, the youth actually, they really pulled their weight, to help the national authorities actually overcome that situation. So that's really amazing, Sara. I now turn to my friend, Sophia Swire, who is not only like me a Agender Lens investor of her fund GEDI, but also through her nonprofit Future Brilliance, has been doing some incredible work in the last couple of months, evacuating Afghan refugees, especially women and girls, to other countries. Sophia, maybe you can share with us an achievement I think that recently I saw on your LinkedIn, something that you're very proud of. Maybe I'll let you tell that story, Sophia.
Yes, well, if you'd like, I can also situate it in the technology discussion, because to be honest with you, without technology, this extraordinary combined and collaborative achievement would not have taken place. And that is that last week, Future Brilliance, the Jedi task force for Future Brilliance, was able to evacuate the famous green-eyed Afghan girl, the Nat Geo cover girl, at the request of Bonnie and Steve McCurry, and with the assistance of the Italian government. She's now in Rome. And this is a sort of testament to the power of technology, and particularly to women in tech, because the whole thing emerged about 6-7 weeks ago when I posted on LinkedIn our GoFundMe campaign, and there was immediately 22,000 views of this post. One of the people viewing it was Steve McCurry's sister, Bonnie, who reached out to me and told me that Sharbat Gula was seeking evacuation, that she was fearing for her life and for the safety of her family. And she asked me if Future Brilliance could help. And of course, the answer was it would be a great honor. This woman, this image inspired my entire life journey. So we all got together through our WhatsApp group, the Jedi task force, which comprises 200 outstanding, mainly female impact investors, pioneers, futurists, technologists, etc., gathered together in August to raise money for Future Brilliance, which is a 501c3 in the US and a British charity as well. And we leapt into action, and Amanda Terry, who's a technologist out of San Francisco, has set up a company called MetaGood with a very interesting group of techies. And they've launched some NFT monkeys, and they were, through their crypto community, they were very quickly able to raise the necessary money, which was donated through Future Brilliance. And we activated our network in Afghanistan. We have boots on the ground in Kabul. We have boots on the ground in Islamabad as well, Afghan boots on the ground, or I shouldn't call them boots on the ground anymore, but we have a highly effective executive team, men and women, Afghan. And in collaboration with Steve McCurry and his sister Bonnie, we were able to secure passports, Tazkiras, Pakistan visas, and in liaison with the Italian Foreign Ministry, and through an extraordinary woman I met called Nina Gardner, who was the moderator of a panel at the Women's Forum at the G20 in September. And she was very close to the woman in the foreign ministry who made this happen for us. So it really is power to the testimony of women's technology networks being able to pull an extraordinary feat off against all odds. And it was very much a stop-start adventure over 6 weeks, which is true of any evacuation. For each and every individual who has been brought to safety, there's a backstory of incredible sort of collaborative assistance. And, for every success, there are 10 failures. It's profoundly challenging the entire thing. And we have supported the evacuation of maybe just over 300 individuals so far. We have another 700 on our list, and many others who are with us in this endeavor have thousands on their lists, and we're battling extraordinary headwinds in the form of our respective governments, etc. But yes, a great achievement, and thanks to technology.
Thank you, Sophia. As a venture capital investor myself, who looks a lot at blockchain and NFTs, and which is all the rage these days, I think many of the investors I'm talking to, I'm always saying, hey, you make that money, but you should apportion a part of that. We should donate it to women and girls. And a lot of this new generation of young investors, especially young men, they actually resonate with that. They believe in that impact, and I think that was a beautiful example of how technology impact and actually protection of rights for women and girls can actually come together. Thank you for that, Sophia, and for all of your efforts. Ladies, at the beginning of this panel, why I think this is the panel I was looking forward to the most, in this entire conference, was because the use of technology to empower women and girls is the exact pillar, is a cornerstone of what She Loves Tech was actually built on. And over the years, we've seen 8,000 over startups, and a lot of them, we're using technology really to help women and girls, as well as people in general, overcome a lot of the physical barriers that they faced in the digital world. So now, turning over to all of you, what role can technology play in creating solutions for the challenges that Afghan women and girls are now facing, whether it's restricted access to work, whether it's not being able to go to school, etc. Can we create a digital world where women can overcome some of these challenges? How can we create this? Who would like to go first? Shaharzad, perhaps you begin.
Thank you, Virginia, and it's so good to hear from all the amazing panelists. It's really inspiring. In Afghanistan, we saw firsthand how technology changed the lives of women. Like having a smartphone, having a phone that's connected to the internet changed the lives of women even before Taliban takeover, because many women in conflict-affected areas and areas where they were living in very patriarchal structures, these smartphones were their way to put their opinion out there in the world. So they would build an anonymous account. They would create accounts under different names on social media, and they would share their stories of their communities, their own stories. They would write poetry. They would contact traditional media through these means. So they would write to TV stations. They would follow their favorite singers and comment on her page. And, they just went beyond the small room in their village where everything was trying to restrict them, and connected with the bigger world. And it changed their visions. I knew about young girls who would send their poetry. Their family had no idea they're writing poetry, but they would send their poetry through internet to TV stations and radio stations, and then that poetry would be read, or they would read their poetry, and the whole of Afghanistan would hear their voice without their restricted family knowing about this. It just made women able to connect to a bigger world in a way that was never imaginable before, a generation before. And right now, when when Taliban have literally closed the public space, the physical public space to women, they want to eradicate women from the physical public space. They're making so many restrictions on women's presence in public space, like you have to be accompanied by a male family member, that basically women are unwilling to go out in the physical space because they're so intimidated and afraid. This is when I think we can use technology again to bring those voices to the public, to make women's voices and concerns part of the public discussion, to allow women, because women have voices, you just have to give them the platform, right? No one can be someone else's voice. They have voices, they have opinions, they have ideas, but they need platforms, they need mediums to get that out. So I think it can play a huge role. I'm very tech illiterate, so I'm sure that colleagues will have more solid ideas. But even with our work in terms of human rights documentation and monitoring, we have started seeing really thinking about how to creatively use technology to protect the safety and security of our sources, and to ensure that there is not a monitoring black hole when someone is dragged out of their house in Nangarhar and killed by Taliban fighters under some fake allegation. It's the technology that allows us to learn about that story, to document it safely with relative safety, and then to make that story part of the history of Afghanistan for accountability now and for accountability in the future. And that was not possible. And it's women as well as men who are reporting these stories to us. And this is also something that would not have been possible if we didn't have technology. But of course, we have to continue investing on women's digital literacy. We have to continue investing on women's education and finding ways to allow more women access, so that then we can benefit from their intelligence, their ideas, and their strength.
Thank you. I turn now to Natasha, because I know that in recent months, a lot of your work has now actually been focused on education, not necessarily just on legal cases. I am a big education technology investor myself, and I've been thinking all the time, how do we bring a lot of this technology to a country like Afghanistan? Because you can learn anything online these days, and also much cheaper. So, but Natasha, I would love for you to share what you've literally been doing the last couple of months. I think it was a real beacon of hope for me.
Thank you. So I very much believe that, for us, when we started working, back in the early 2000s, we were working shoulder to shoulder with lawyers who took 10 years to become a lawyer because of the armed conflict that disrupted their education. And so for us right now, we know that public universities may open for women in the future. Perhaps they're putting in policies for gender segregation, so on and so forth. But gender segregation policy doesn't equal to safe education for women. We don't know if they may block women from accessing certain faculties, whether women can even be lawyers now that the Bar Association is in the hands of the Ministry of Justice, and lawyers are no longer independent. And so for us, we think let the situation fluctuate. It's out of our control. It's a variable that's going to be directed by forces that's just outside of our system. But one thing that we can do is, I think about those lawyers that took 10 years to graduate and to become lawyers, that I'm seeing, we're seeing, okay, in 10 years' time, Afghanistan is definitely going to change in some way or the other. Women will take back their spaces. It may take some time. So how do we build that generation of, it's not just lawyers, it's lawyer leaders that have professional skills, communication skills, ability to build trust and rapport with communities, ability to understand, manage stress and trauma, especially intergenerational trauma. These are all soft and hard skills. It's not just, I know about civil procedure and criminal procedure, but it's about building self-confidence, self-resources when one is confronted by a conservative judge or demeaned, as is always the case, patronized. How do you draw your own self-resources to work with that system? So the program that we create is not just about Article 1, 2, 3 of the law, but it's about how do you practice it? How do you enable yourself resources? How do you work with different stakeholders? You've got your healthcare workers and your psychosocial counselors, and you've got community elders. How do you build relationships? Because after all, the network will also be your protection. We found we took some of the most dangerous cases in Afghanistan even before the crisis happened. And the reasons why we were able to protect ourselves as best as we can was the building of the network. So these are all skills, hard and soft skills, that we need to train this next generation of lawyer leaders, because I'm in the field of law, but also human rights defenders, to become leaders in their own right and to face the situation as it unfolds. That's for us, that's education. And at the same time, it's how then at some point talent, intellect, these resources are going to be essential. Countries never run by government. Countries run by communities working in cooperation with the government. Government cannot work in isolation forever. They will realize that even in the former government, with all of these $2 trillion that apparently was invested, there was a lot of reliance on communities to deliver basic services. That's going to be more pertinent now. So for us, is to ensure that this next cohort of civil society leaders that we're raising, that they can then serve those needs. They will become dependent on at some point, whether or not they are allowed to represent women in court, but they will become dependent on. The new government will depend on them. So we at the moment are we're using WhatsApp, Google Meet to teach these courses. We do office hours on WhatsApp. We do question and answer sessions. We even do mock trials on WhatsApp. And this was really out of the demand from the students to restart our programs, even though we were not capacitated and everyone was kind of running around. So I think that expansion of education online and also underground education is going to be an area of work that the international community can support Afghan civil society groups to absorb.
Thank you, Natasha. I think when we spoke on this, I think you were saying that in the north of the country, for example, some of the schools have reopened, and you've been allowed to sort of resume your programs, working on professional skills, working on community building skills, working on practical skills, essentially. And I think that shows a certain level of pragmatism, despite everything which is going on and all the headlines that we read. I felt like that it was amazing that an organization like yourself, with is adapting quickly to on the ground, and doing everything you can, to address the situation. Sara, I turn back to you, given that you've spent essentially the last couple of years really building Etis up, focusing on technology first solution, right? And I think other people have had to migrate from physical to technology, but you started off digital to begin with. What kind of applications do you see for Etis up? Could we build other applications, on your platform? Maybe perhaps you can share that. And what is the role of youth, in making this happen?
Well, the first thing I want to say is that Edtech is going to explode in Afghanistan. I can tell you right now, I know off the top of my head probably 5 innovators who are working on Edtech in Afghanistan, both Afghan and both non-Afghan. So it's going to be an area of technology that is just going to burst into the public sphere. And we saw the success with Edtech in India, with a large portion of the population which essentially was seen as disconnected, from the World Wide Web, which was found to be completely false. We're going to be seeing the same thing in Afghanistan, and it's complemented by the fact that Afghan youth have an extreme thirst to continue their education, and we know that they are very digitally oriented. It's not very difficult for an Afghan youth to pick up a phone and learn how it works within a few minutes. So the capacity is there, and technology knows no bounds. So finding a solution isn't difficult, because with technology we work beyond the parameters of just a government or whatever institution is in power, and it really requires the entire tech community to come come together and see what we can do, because we have seen the successes of other countries in the global south who probably don't have the same kind of conflict instances as Afghanistan, but they have succeeded with the issue of lack of electricity or rural areas. So we know that it is possible in Afghanistan. And the second thing about the use of technology, actually a young girl in Herat, following the news, this really happy news that schools in Herat had opened, had emailed anonymously to Ihtisab, to our info page, and had just written very, very simply, do you know that my school isn't open? And people are saying that schools are open, mine isn't. And she gave the name of her school. And we were furiously waiting to corroborate that information so we could post about it. So we are seeing young women, even girls post and let us know about what's going on in their communities. But to continue my work, I have to stress that we're really running on bare bones at this point, because we're all working remotely. Other than myself, I have our entire team is in Kabul, but expanding Ihtisab, of course, we are planning to also enter the Edtech sphere. And because our team has been working in Afghanistan in technology with this day-to-day realities and post-Talib Afghanistan, we know exactly how to move forward. We have the platform set. We know how to make this work. But without stakeholders, without support, we cannot do this. We have never taken funding. We have worked on our own as a team, but we know that we can find the outcome for investors, but it takes that trust. And we hope that the trust we've built at the Ihtisab and the trust that Afghans have shown in us and the expansion that we're having, that we can start working in EdTech and other sectors, but we need the support, because otherwise it's impossible for something like a civic technology platform like Ihtisab to continue in these realities.
Thank you for that. As always, I'm blown away by what young people can do. And Sarah, that's exactly why we have a platform like She Loves Tech, so that you can talk to venture capitalists like us. And I think, for example, you should definitely talk to Sophia right after this call as well, right? Because I think that's what Jedi was really set up for, and that's why She Loves Tech, has his own fund as well. It's to look at things like this, right? And we have to step at these times. I'm going to pose a slightly different question, as my next question, right? I think we all know the Afghan banking system has really struggled, right, since the crisis actually happened, and it's on the brink of collapse. So how can funds really be channeled into the right hands to assist, people who need help? The United Nations has said that there needs to be a way to get money to the Afghan people without necessarily going through the regime. Sophia, is this a gap that you think philanthropists and impact investors can close, given who can step up to help when large institutions are pausing? And how can we use technology, Sophia? I asked this question, right, and I thought it was important because one of the first companies that we ever funded at Teja, which came out of She Loves Tech, was precisely a digital aid distribution platform, which could where money could be passed, could be transferred to people who are unbanked, so they don't have bank accounts. So and they don't. Most of them don't have smartphones either. And what we would do is that they would input their face, onto the app. They would go to the nearest mom and pop, their retail store. We would scan their face. They would have a PIN code, and then that unlocks $100 of them to buy rice or cooking oil or whatever it is it needed. This came out of She Loves Tech in 2017. And so Sophia, turning to you, and I think you were telling us, women for tech for good, right? Who can step up? How do impact investors like yourself and philanthropists close the gap?
Personally, I think that the sanctions need to be lifted against certain benchmarks of behavior. I don't think that philanthropists and impact investors can replace the job of the IMF, the World Bank, and international government. There's no way that with all the best will in the world, we can collaboratively reach 43 million people in time for the winter, for the shortages in fuel, in medication, and in food. So I would call for the IMF, the World Bank, and the world governments to consider lifting or easing the sanctions to allow the banks again to distribute cash, because people aren't being paid. You know, I mean, government officials, teachers, policemen, soldiers, no one is being paid. So if no one's getting cash, how can they possibly support their families? So that's the first thing I would say. In terms of how we're getting cash into the country, there are different ways. You can send small quantities through Western Union. You can also send money through cryptocurrencies. I know that Roya Mahboob has had some success sending out money through the Hawala system using Bitcoin, which is rather interesting. Wendy Diamond has a plan to bring cryptocurrency to 1 million Afghan women, which is amazing. But as you rightly point out, people need smartphones and access to technology, which the vast majority of Afghans still don't have, even though many do, millions do. And then the other way that some people are getting money into Kabul is that many Afghans have left, leaving money behind. And in some cases, it may be possible to access those resources and then reimburse people abroad. But the UNHCR has found a way to bring cash into the country, but none of this will replace the easing of sanctions to allow the banking system to function again. So that is what I would personally call for.
Okay, so basically, the use of potentially crypto, obviously, the use of smartphones, but would help, but that wouldn't necessarily replace the role of public institutions. I think as we bring this panel to a close, I would like for each of you to really share what are the resources needed to help you in your work. How are each of you mobilizing resources? What help do you need? How can we, the international community of women in tech, entrepreneurs, executives, investors, how can we help you? Maybe 2 sentences each, because we'd love to see how we can do more.
Shall I go first?
Please.
Virginia?
Please.
Okay. So in the short term, we have 2 priorities. The first is to bring as much humanitarian relief to as many people as possible. The rest is sticking plaster. Having said that, there's clear and present danger for activists, journalists, lawmakers, judges, etc., especially females, and we're still trying to get many of those out. At this point, where countries all over the world are closing their doors to asylum seekers, cash is king. Albania, North Macedonia, etc., charge approximately $10,000 per annum to provide accommodation and sustenance to each individual Afghan asylum seeker. So donate where you can. Future Brilliance has got GoFundMe campaigns for the US and the UK. Reach out to us and other NGOs that are working in this field, and do so immediately, please. There's no time to lose. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophia. Sara?
We need funding. One of the ways that we want to expand through Afghanistan is through SMS texts. As Sophia mentioned, smartphones, we're not going to see that upward trajectory that we were seeing before August. That means that we need to reach people with the phones that they have, which are usually the handheld Nokias. And we'd like to start utilizing those forms of communication. And that requires us to connect with a SMS subscription service, so we can, number one, keep our alert system going and people to be able to send in reports. And a third, also to perhaps enter Edtech. We have seen Edtech in other countries with case studies who have provided Edtech through Nokia phones, and we would like to start looking into that. So anyone who believes in Afghanistan and believes in Afghan talent, we're here. We've been working in this sector for a long time, and we're ready to talk.
Thank you, Sara. What is the cost of building something like that?
For something sustainable, we're looking about $100,000, so not very much, and that would be on a yearly basis.
Okay, thank you, Sara. Shaharzad.
Thank you, Virginia. I think the key message that I have here is don't forget Afghanistan. People tend to forget crises very easily and move on. But don't forget that it's not just about starvation, and it's not just about misery, but it's also about millions of young people who aspire to lives like people have everywhere else in the world. Lives with dignity, access to education, access to employment, access to freedom of expression, be able to say what they want, say what they think, be able to move freely, and that's talent. That's a wealth for the human community. We are all the same community. We are a family, and we shouldn't forget members of the family. So I think it's important to keep the spotlight on, keep engaging with young Afghans, keep hearing from them, and trying to find ways to help, because if you are in need, we will try to help you. Thank you.
And last but not least, Natasha.
Yeah, I would repeat what Sophia, Sara, and Shaharzad has said. Sophia, I'm going to reach out to you because I have got people needing financial assistance in Albania as well. Beyond that, I have like this group of now 50 leaders. We will probably expand in the next couple of months if security is not an issue. Invest in these leaders. If we can make sure that they receive an income once they finish the education, we will place them in the community in order to respond to survivors of war and violence needing help and assistance. And hopefully these are going to be the next generation of civil servants in the government, if not this, then the next. Thank you very much, Virginia.
Thank you, Natasha. She Loves Tech is supporting Women for Justice Afghanistan to really capacitate the next generation of civil society leaders and to advocate for women's right to work and to be educated. So if any of you would like to contribute, you can contact us at She Loves Tech or Natasha at wjoafg.org. Or feel free to reach out to me personally. I really believe that She Loves Tech is based on the idea of having a community. Obviously, when we first started, we never thought it would be used for things like this. But I think technology, and how that can empower women and girls, in a way that the physical world couldn't, or the way the physical world was failing us, is precisely behind this mission, which keeps all of us going here at She Loves Tech. And I also often believe that women are building technology not just for financial means, but really for social good. It's something that we've seen over and over and over again, over the past 7 years. And when I listen to a lot of Sophia's sort of examples, I'm gratified. In fact, Sophia, I'm going to go back and look right at this because we start to invest a lot in blockchain and NFTs as well, to see how we can mobilize communities, if not physically, then digitally. Finally, I think as we end off, the first day of She Loves Tech 2021, I wanted to say thank you to all of you ladies, for your time. I know it's like 5 a.m., for Sarah in the US. But I think what's really important is that it's times like this when women, we need to step up and actually, I think, support each other. And how I find She Loves Tech, our global conference, how it's different from a lot of the other technology conferences that there are, is that when we think of a technology conference, we're always thinking about, okay, what is the latest tech? How are we going to just make the next billion? How are you going to build like a trillion unicorn? Which is what tech conferences are usually about. And I mean, that's really exciting too. I mean, I love investing. But I feel what the four of you gave us today was a reminder of how technology is really only an instrument, and how that instrument can be mobilized for good for many. And what we wanted to do was really give a platform for your voices, and to actually give us hope. And I think which four of you have given us a lot of today is hope. And I couldn't think of a better way to end off the first day of our conference. We look forward to supporting you more, connecting you more. Let us know what we can do. Thank you, ladies. And thank you to the audience for listening, to this today. It's very close to my heart.